you censorious thug. Do you remember this video clip of Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's Prime Minister, early in the pandemic? What a little fascist she is.
We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information. You can also trust the Director General of Health and the Ministry of Health. For that information, do feel free to visit at any time to clarify any rumour you may hear, covid19.govt.nz. Otherwise, dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. We will provide information frequently. We will share everything we can, everything else you see, a grain of salt. And so I really ask people to focus on that.
The most egregious example of that appears to be this text which originated in Malaysia and has become a viral hoax in Australia and in New Zealand. How irresponsible is it the people that are sharing that news of a lockdown imminent in New Zealand?
Yeah, and look, that's the kind of thing that adds to the anxiety that people feel. So I continue to share the message. New Zealanders must prepare, but do not panic. Prepare. And when you see those messages, remember that unless you hear it from us, it is not the truth. And I really ask people, just visit covid19.govt.nz. It has all of the up-to-date information, and we will continue to provide everything you need to know.
You know, sometimes people tell me to change the name of Rebel News, and I think the number one suggestion people give me is to call it Truth News. And obviously, I believe we tell the truth, but I also know that there are other points of view out there. And from time to time, we can get things wrong, and someone can see things from another angle. It's like a car accident. Two different witnesses standing in two different places can tell two different stories, but they're both telling the truth. They saw it. And so I would never say we're called Truth News, because I would never be so absolutely certain that we could never be wrong and that our critics could never be right. That's not false modesty. It's just there are some things that we don't know. And there are some things I'm sure that we think we know that we will one day realize we're wrong. I suppose that's all obvious. Our command of the world is imperfect and always will be. Only God is omniscient and omnipotent. We are flawed. And anyone who tells you they're not is either misleading you or misleading themselves. That's why we're not called Truth News. And that's why Jacinda Ardern is a wacky tyrant when she tells you to dismiss anything else you hear, dismiss anyone else who contradicts her. And she says that sight unseen in advance of hearing any critic. Without yet hearing the objection, she rules it out. We will continue to be your single source of truth. A Christian pastor could say the Bible is the perfect truth, and maybe he's right, but he doesn't have the power of the police and the state to back him up, or even the power of censorship over YouTube and Facebook to back him up. And I think that pastor would probably say the Bible is the perfect truth. I doubt he would say that he himself, a flawed sinner, was a perfect source of truth. Imagine saying that about yourself. Dismiss anyone else, everything else. We're the single source of truth, and that if anyone else says something contradictory, ignore them without question. And don't you worry about any of this. Don't you worry your pretty little head. We will continue to provide everything you need to know. Really, who talks that way? Well, Jacinda Ardern does. And you know, she hitched a ride recently with Justin Trudeau, her left-wing globalist mini-me, from London to New York. They were both in London for the Queen's funeral, and in Trudeau's case, to do some drunken singing in a bar in a party atmosphere. Yeah, Trudeau's so classy. So what did they talk about on that flight to New York? Well, they're both young World Economic Forum types. I guess they're not so young anymore. I mean, Klaus Schwab is pretty proud of them.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets.
I think they probably talked about the things they have in common, their love of authoritarianism, taking rights away from people, replacing local sovereignty with globalist control, censorship, forced vaccines, gun control. But out of all those things, censorship is the most important, because if you still have free speech left, You can fight to regain your other rights, but without free speech, you can't. So let me show you what Trudeau and his U.S. taxpayers paid to bring Ardern to New York to say. Here are some clips from Ardern's visit to the UN and her big speech there. Of course, she starts off in Maori. I mean, if you think Justin Trudeau is woke and virtue signaling, he's never tried this before.
Ina mana, ina reo, raurangatira mā, kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei whare nui o te ao. Nā mihi mai aha kia koutou katoa, mai I toko whenua o Aotearoa. Tuia ki runga, tuia ki raro, ka rongo to pō ka rongo te ao. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
I don't think Ardern actually knows how to speak Maori. I think she just memorized those lines like an actor, like Trudeau's an actor, like when he rattled off this for a reporter on command. He's good at memorizing a few lines, not much more.
I was going to ask you to explain quantum computing, but when do you expect Canada's ISIL mission to begin again? And are we not doing anything in the interim while we prepare?
Okay. Very simply, normal computers work by... Don't interrupt me. When you walk out of here, you will know more. Well, no, some of you will know far less about quantum computing, but most of you, normal computers work either there's power going through a wire or not. It's 1 or a 0. They're binary systems. What quantum states allow for is much more complex information to be encoded into a single bit. A regular computer bit is either a 1 or a 0, on or off. A quantum state can be much more complex than that because, as we know, things can be both particle and wave at the same times, and the uncertainty around quantum states allows us to encode more information into a much smaller computer. So that's what's exciting about quantum computing, and that's what we're
Back to the speech at the UN, here's what she said.
COVID-19 was devastating. It took millions of lives.
That's not quite true. It did take millions of lives if you trust the statistics, but I know that in the West, the statistics included anyone often who died within 30 days of a diagnosis of COVID. So they could have died from some other cause, but COVID was to blame. Made more money that way for hospitals, for more excitement for TV doctors, for politicians, for vaccine companies. Now that's the disease, and I'm not minimizing its actual death toll. I'm saying there was massive overcounting, as many jurisdictions have since grudgingly acknowledged. But look at what she moves to immediately. Sure, she cares about COVID. I don't doubt it. But she cares about using COVID for other political goals too. Listen to this.
It set us back in our fight against the crisis of climate change and progress on the Sustainable Development Goals while we looked to the health crisis that was right in front of us.
Global warming, that's what she really cares about.
The lessons of COVID are in many ways the same as the lessons of climate change. When crisis is upon us, we cannot and will not solve these issues on our own. The next pandemic will not be prevented by one country's efforts, but by all of ours. Climate action will only ever be as successful as the least committed country as they pull down the ambition of the collective.
She really is doing that. She really is using the deaths of people as a political platform to stand on the dead bodies, to push her obsession with global warming. If you think it's absurd for Canada, with our tiny population of 38 million people, to try to stop the world from warming, imagine how nutty it is for New Zealand to do that. They're just 5 million people. And you have to fly across the ocean to get anywhere. Imagine being obsessed by that. So naturally, she goes to globalism, giving the power to faraway organizations like the United Nations.
We need a dual strategy, one where we push for collective effort, but where we also use our multilateral tools to make progress. And that's why on pandemic preparedness, we support efforts to develop a new global health legal instrument, strengthened international health regulations, and a strong and empowered World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization, she wants to give them more power, the one that's run by China? The same World Health Organization that told the world, don't worry, COVID-19 is not contagious. That World Health Organization? Has anyone over there actually been fired? I mean, I know you can't unelect them, but seriously, not a soul over there fired. She talked more about global warming, in her bones. She wants to bring in climate lockdowns, just like COVID lockdowns. She wants to. She did some virtue signaling about Ukraine and calls for the abolition of nuclear weapons. By the West, of course. I mean, do you think China or Russia would ever give them up? Listen.
Nuclear weapons do not make us safer. There will be those who agree, but believe it's simply too hard to rid ourselves of nuclear weapons at this juncture. There is no question that nuclear disarmament is an enormous challenge. But if given the choice, and we are being given a choice, surely we would choose the challenge of disarmament than the consequences of a failed strategy of weapons-based deterrence.
What does that mean? I mean, she has no nukes in New Zealand. Neither does Canada. So she's calling on America to disarm, but let China and Russia keep their nukes? She used to be the youth head of the Socialist International. She's still got that pro-Soviet message track. But look, she's got no chance to eliminate nukes. She was just saying that to impress her old socialist friends. She does, however, have the power to censor New Zealanders, and that was the main point of her speech.
Traditional combat, espionage, and the threat of nuclear weapons are now accompanied by cyber attacks, prolific disinformation, and manipulation of whole communities and societies.
Remember, she's your only source of truth. Ignore everyone else, and if she has to call everyone else a foreign spy or disinformation agent, she will. I mean, she would never engage in misinformation herself. Oh, no. Only her critics do that.
Now, as leaders, we have never treated the weapons of old in the same way as those that have emerged. And that's understandable. After all, a bullet takes a life. A bomb takes out a whole village. A lie online or from a podium does not. But what if that lie, told repeatedly and across many platforms, prompts, inspires, or motivates others to take up arms, to threaten the security of others, to turn a blind eye to atrocities, or worse, to become complicit in them? What then?
Every action comes from an idea, obviously, but there is an enormous difference between an idea and an action. She would literally ban ideas, thoughts, words that in her prophecy could possibly one day lead to a conflict that she doesn't like. I'm not sure what words she thinks led to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm not sure if she's blaming some Facebook post in New Zealand for causing that war. I think it was Russia's Vladimir Putin that did the invasion. He sensed weakness in the West, especially under Joe Biden. I don't think it was some comment on Facebook or YouTube that made him do it. I think it was the state of Russia itself that committed the violence, by the way, not an ordinary citizen, certainly not one in New Zealand. But she somehow has blamed everyone who has an idea she doesn't like, who says a word she doesn't like. She blames them for an invasion by an authoritarian ruler halfway around the world. What? Here's some more.
This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old. We recognize the threats that the old weapons created. We came together as communities to minimize these threats. We created international rules, norms, and expectations. We never saw that as a threat to our individual liberties. Rather, it was a preservation of them. The same must apply now as we take on these new challenges.
She's speaking vaguely, but her point is clear. Words are weapons, and she wants to ban word weapons that she doesn't like. Now, she briefly tips her hat to freedom of speech, and then the word but comes in. It's like Salman Rushdie always says. Ignore everything before the word but.
And now, the moment somebody says, yes, I believe in free speech, but, I stop listening. No, because I believe in free speech, but people should behave themselves. I believe in free speech, but we shouldn't upset anybody. I believe in free speech, but let's not go too far. The point about it is the moment you limit free speech, it's not free speech. The point about it is that it's free.
Exactly. Now watch this clip and listen for the word but.
In New Zealand, we deeply value our right to protest. Some of our major social progress has been brought about by hekoi or people power, becoming the first country in the world to recognise women's right to vote, movement on major Indigenous and human rights issues, to name but a few. Upholding these values in a modern environment translates into protecting a free, secure, and open internet. To realize all of the opportunities that it presents in the way we communicate, the way we organize, the way we gather. But that does not mean the absence of transparency, expectations, or even rules, if we correctly identify what it is we are trying to prevent.
Did you hear the word but make an appearance? But.
And surely we can start with violent extremism and terrorist content online.
Okay, well, terrorism is already banned online in every country in the world. Of course, she means incitement of terrorism, which is banned. No one is actually killed online, but that's already banned under criminal law and by the social media platforms too. They don't allow terrorism online. But she uses the phrase extremism and the word content, which only she will define, like Trudeau did. I mean, he called the peaceful truckers extremists. He actually defamed them as violent too. Ardern moves from rare terrorist attacks to treating everyone online as a potential terrorist and getting algorithms to suffocate dissenting opinions.
This week, we launched an initiative alongside companies and nonprofits to help improve research and understanding of how a person's online experiences are curated by automated processes. This will also be important in understanding more about mis- and disinformation online, a challenge that we must, as leaders, address. Sadly, I think it's easy to dismiss this problem as one in the margins. I can certainly understand the desire to leave it to someone else.
She's saying it's not rare. She's saying it's not on the margins. She's saying everyone you meet could be a potential terrorist. Everyone who has extreme opinions, like opposing her on climate or the lockdowns, I imagine, that's extreme to her.
As leaders, we're rightly concerned that even the most light touch approaches to disinformation could be misinterpreted as being hostile to the values of free speech that we value so highly. But while I cannot tell you today what the answer is to this challenge, I can say with complete certainty that we cannot ignore it. To do so poses an equal threat to the norms we all value.
Did you hear the word but appear there again? I love free speech, but we can't ignore the problems with free speech. But it's a threat, but always the word but.
After all, how do you successfully end a war if people are led to believe the reason for its existence is not only legal but noble? How do you tackle climate change if people do not believe it exists? How do you ensure the human rights of others are upheld when they are subjected to hateful and dangerous rhetoric and ideology?
Is she saying that censoring people in New Zealand on Facebook will cause Putin and Zelensky to end a war? Did the war start because of something her citizens said? If not, why are they being punished for the war? She literally says that free speech is a weapon of war that needs to be defeated.
The weapons may be different, but the goals of those who perpetuate them is often the same: to cause chaos and reduce the ability of others to defend themselves, to disband communities, to collapse the collective strength of countries who work together. But we have an opportunity here to ensure that these particular weapons of war do not become an established part of warfare.
That's what she's saying. She's saying that free speech is what caused the war, so it must be stopped. It's actually violence, not just speech.
And so, we once again come back to the primary tool we have: diplomacy, dialogue, working together on solutions that do not undermine human rights but enhance them.
By the way, what diplomacy in Ukraine has she ever supported? I haven't seen any. Jacinda Ardern is an even more authoritarian bully than Justin Trudeau is. And because New Zealand is an island, she can sort of be more abusive to her citizens than even Trudeau can be. And their media is even worse than ours in many ways. But she and France's Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau all share the World Economic Forum globalist view on free speech, that it is the problem, not Putin. Free speech is a weapon that needs to be destroyed. But really, if all you need to know, if all the truth you could ever want comes from Jacinda Ardern herself, why would you ever want to think a thought by yourself? What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.